Inside Number 9 Series 7 has just finished airing, and the fact that this show can go for 7 seasons whilst remaining consistently amazing is just insane, honestly. As you could tell from my active video recently, I've been on a bit of a Number 9 kick recently thanks to this new season airing, which has led me to want to rank and review every episode in this latest series. Before starting, I've got a few things to say. Firstly, no Number 9 episode is bad in my opinion. For me, my least favourite episodes are still a 7 out of 10, which is still a good score for me, so I don't think that my bottom pick is a bad episode. Second, Number 9 relies heavily on twists, so this list will contain major spoilers. I would hate to ruin the experience, so if you haven't seen the season, pause the video, give it a like, and then binge through the whole season. There's only 6 episodes and they're half an hour each. Don't worry though, this video won't contain any spoilers for any season besides Series 7. Finally, this video is just my opinion. If you love the episode I put at the bottom, which admittedly is very likely, don't get mad please. First of all, I still like it. Second, it's just my opinion and I respect yours as well. Anyway, now that I've got the waffle out the way, let's get to the list.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah!
Oh boy, I've started the list off with a controversial pick, haven't I? Mr. King seems to be a very popular episode amongst the fandom, so I know I'm probably going to get sent to the yearly ritual sacrifice for my hearsay. Joking apart, I did still like this episode. As I said in the opening, every Number 9 episode is at least a 7 out of 10, which is a good score in my book, and Mr. King is no different. Let's start with why I like it despite it being at the bottom of my list. First up, the performances all round were great. Steve and Reese were obviously great as usual, with the highlight of the two probably being Steve as the psychotic headmaster, Mr. Edwards. I just love the jokes all about how behind on technology he is. I've honestly started calling emails B-mails thanks to him. Also, Steve's Welsh accent was pretty spot on in my eyes. Also, Margaret the Slovene herself, Annette Badland, also absolutely cracked me up.
Oh, I thought he was taking photographs of your cock.
The child actors were also all superb, I think. Great job, kids. I wonder what they will think when they're finally old enough to watch the episode. I also like the setting of a school. I think a Number 9 in the school was a pretty simple yet obvious idea, which I'm glad they finally got round to covering. The last positive I'm going to mention is I like how the topic of climate change was used, especially with the scene where Kerry talks to Mr. Curtis, which is Reese's character by the way, and she gets upset after learning about the effects of climate change. I thought that the scene was really well done, and the actress playing Kerry did a fantastic job. It's a situation which I think a lot of current youth can relate to, as climate change is indeed quite scary. However, after all this positivity, I need to explain why this story is at the bottom. The reason it's at the bottom is simply because it's not for me. Allow me to explain myself. I don't like the Wickerman story, and stories like it, like Midsummer. I think that basically sums it all up. I'm personally not a fan of rituals and sacrifices and cults, etc., so a story like this was never going to do it for me. Furthermore, I really didn't like Mr. Curtis's investigation and all the stuff with the willies. It was honestly really unnecessary and felt like it was only done to make us feel uncomfortable. I know the canon reason for all the dick pics was to check for circumcision, but the story would have been fine without it, honestly. So overall, Mr. King is a good Number 9 episode, but it really isn't for me, so it's one of my least favourite episodes, and definitely my least favourite of Series 7. To be honest, I'd rather rewatch Last Gasp, because honestly I'd defend that episode. Although, extra points given to the episode as they referenced the Biff and Chip books. That was a wave of nostalgia right there.
Well, where do you suppose she's got this from then? Because I don't recall that being in the Biff and Chip books.
I don't know. And they became real to me. And then one day, they actually became real.
I imagine that Nine Lives Cat is the episode that most people probably put at the bottom of their list, as it seems to be quite a divisive one, and I can see both sides of the argument. On the one hand, the story is just really bizarre. It's not the weird and wacky kind of bizarre from Mr. King which people loved. This story is just very convoluted. I was barely keeping track of the story throughout, and I wasn't even sure that I got what the story was going for when it ended. until I listened to the Inside Number 9 podcast. By the way, be sure to listen to that podcast as it's great. Furthermore, it can be really hard to relate to any of the characters, or feel any of the stakes, especially on a rewatch when you know that they're all fictional. Also, the episode can be a really slow watch. On first viewing, you have to sit through a load of, honestly, painfully bad lines, which I will get into later. And on a rewatch, you know what's happening, but you're just waiting for the fictional plot to wrap up to get to the good stuff. Finally, I was really hoping for an actual detective story, so it was sad when we didn't get it. That being said though, I still like this one a lot because I can see its hidden brilliance. Those painfully bad lines I mentioned earlier are bad, but it was surprisingly, brilliantly, intentionally bad to show how the writing is cliche, and that's honestly really meta and really clever and kinda blows my mind. This cliche storytelling was also demonstrated to us through Reese's character, who seriously made me cringe first go round, due to the autistic stereotypes.
Oh, Matt Damon. Yeah. Yeah, he'd get the intensity, and he was great in that Sky thing a couple of years ago.
Matt Damon.
They're not gonna get Matt Damon, alright? He's American.
But when you learn that this story is meant to be a satire of those stereotypes due to the cliches, I think it was a lot better. Also, the acting all around was great. Sophia Canido as Kat was brilliant, and I'm shocked at how she was able to make certain lines, like the terrible teeth one, actually work in the story. Steve and Reese were great as usual, but once again, I think the highlight was Steve, as he had a lot more to do, and was less cringy than Reese. Overall, this is definitely a clever number 9 episode, and one of the most meta, and is definitely due a rewatch. I best describe the episode as Inception meets the film Goosebumps. Basically, the Goosebumps film is like a meta take on the stories where Jack Black plays R.L. Stine, who has to lock his books away as the monsters come to life. Obviously, it's not the exact same story, but it's similar. I can see why people like my dad didn't click with it, but I personally enjoyed it. However, my opinions may easily change on a rewatch, so you never know, I may end up preferring Mr. King within a year.
I'm on a boat. I'm on a boat. Everybody look at me, cause I'm sailing on a boat.
And now we're on to the first episode of the season, which I loved. And funnily enough, it's the first episode of the season. I knew before watching that Merrily Merrily would be great, purely because of Mark Gatiss being there. But even then, I was surprised by how deep the story was. The story went from being a fun story about 4 people on Pedalo, but it turned into a surprisingly emotional story about death, and I thought it was done really well. I will say that I thought the ending with the ferryman was a bit unnecessary, and I would have preferred that the episode just ended with the fireworks, but that's my only problem with the episode. Everything else is phenomenal. For the first time in this list, I think that Reese was the better character in the episode, because of how deep Lawrence's story was with the loss of his wife and everything. Although this is not to discredit Steve's character, or any of the other characters for that matter, as they were all really deep with some great layers to them. For example, Donna, played by Philomena Kunk herself, Diane Morgan, seemed really ditzy at the start and, well, she was, and it led to some great humour. However, she was also shown to be very caring, especially towards Darren, who was Steve's character. Speaking of Darren, that moment where he confesses that he was kicked out of university because his dyslexia was causing him problems was really shocking yet powerful, and made other parts like Donna crying at Darren's really basic book hit hard, because you know that it's because Darren is trying his hardest to help those also with dyslexia.
If life gives you melons, you're probably dyslexic.
And finally, there's Callum, who reveals how much he hates his job as a doctor, which is a really intriguing dilemma faced by a lot of people. Also, he's played by Mark Gatiss, so of course he was great. I know I've spent a lot of time on the characters, but that's because this episode is a fantastic character study, probably the best character study of the season, and one of the best of the whole show. And it's good that the characters are all written so well, as there isn't much action in the episode until the end, but that isn't a problem at all because the character dynamics are so intriguing and you're invested at everything they say. Overall, this episode was a fantastic opener, with my only gripe being the very end, although I know many people didn't mind it. If I didn't love The Devil of Christmas and Zanzibar so much, then this would be my favourite opener of the entire show. This episode truly was fantastic, and it's also a good one for new viewers to number 9, as one of my friends watched this as the very first number 9 episode, and they loved it. Also, shoutouts to the episode having a really different setting, as we've never had a number 9 episode outside, let alone one on a pedalo.
Are you kidnapping me?
Well, of course you're getting kidnapped. I
Yes,
just took you off.
Oh, this is so exciting. I can't wait to tell everybody. But once if you kill me, and then I can't tell anybody. Ah!
I always love a number 9 episode with a unique presentation gimmick, like CCTV cameras for Cold Comfort, 70s cameras for The Devil of Christmas, and backwards storytelling in Once Removed, to name but a crippling few. The split screen in Kid/Nap is no different whatsoever. Whilst the main plot is relatively simple for number 9 standards, as it's just a typical kidnapping plot gone wrong, I still love the episode because of all the unique differences. I already mentioned the split screen, but I love how differently it's used throughout the episode. It's used for both comedy and suspense. The phone call scene was especially well done and really nail-biting. However, it was also well done in terms of comedy, where it showed the differences between Lara and Shane's lives in the opening, as well as Dominic's pursuit inside the house later on. Another thing I love about the episode is Lara. At first she seemed like a typical kidnap victim, but then it's revealed that she is really the greatest mastermind behind everything. The way she was able to keep her act up for Shane in the first half was impressive, and the way she was able to convince Shane to work with her to split the money in the end was just brilliant. Steve and Reese take a back seat in this episode, however I do prefer Reese's Dominic's attitude and stupidity was honestly hilarious.
Hi, this is Dominic Grant, Woodgrange Capital.
I don't give a fuck who you work for.
Sorry, it was just a force of habit.
All of the main characters are great, especially Daniel Mays as Shane. Funnily enough, I ended up rewatching the Doctor Who episode he was in the same week that Kidnap aired. It wasn't even intentional, I just forgot he was in Night Terrors. I know the final twist may not seem that big to some people, but to be fair, not every number 9 episode needs a huge twist. Sometimes a good, fun, yet suspenseful story will be all that someone like me needs. So overall, I personally have no major problems with Kidnap. So it's the first episode on this list which I would happily give a 10 out of 10 to. Yeah, it only gets better from here.
Am I speaking to Mr. Cannon?
No! This is Patrick!
Possibly.
Time travel! I see this as an absolute win.
A Random Act of Kindness, SS, is a very unique episode, EE, in number 9, NN, and I think the best way to describe EE, it is, essentially, SS, LL. Love's Great Adventure, EE, meets EE, The Stakeout. Okay, I'll stop with the double letters now, jeez that was hard. You may ask why I think this episode is similar to those other two. Well, A Random Act of Kindness has themes of love and family like Love's Great Adventure, but it's also got a bonkers and seemingly out of nowhere twist like in The Stakeout, which still works surprisingly well. This story is all about a single mother played by the great Jessica Hines and her teenage son Zach. Zach is a very typical teenager who doesn't really like his mum and can generally be quite moody. The mother, Helen, is trying desperately to connect with her son but is struggling, as she just can't seem to please him. This family dynamic is played incredibly realistic and is just really well done. This dynamic is easily the best part of the episode and is why it works so well. However, Bob arrives, played by Pemberton, and helps Zach with his physics and cares for Helen. However, we later find out that Bob is actually Zach from the future, who has come to tell his past self to be nicer to his mum because she's got a terminal illness and will die soon while Zach has left home to go to university with his dad in Singapore. The moment where Helen found out about her illness was really impactful, and when the penny dropped about the time travel, I admittedly thought, surely not. However, the time travel was done really well in my opinion. It's foreshadowed quite well throughout the episode due to Pemberton and Valentine's similar looks, as well as Bob getting away from Helen coming onto him because, yeah, this is Back to the Future all over again. The time travel was also great because of the aftermath of Zach's interfering. We find out through Reese's character, who was randomly appearing throughout the episode giving physics lessons, which are admittedly helping me with my GCSE revision, that him and Zach worked together to create time travel in the first place. However, due to Zach never leaving his mum, he instead studied chemistry. Whilst this helped him find a cure for cancer and help his mum out, it meant that people like Reese ended up worse off. This is a very similar idea to the butterfly effect, and I love when time travel stories dwell on that, as I find it really clever. I'm just a sucker for time travel in general. I think that overall, A Random Act of Kindness is one of the best examples of time travel in TV. I am also so glad that number 9 did a sci-fi story without feeling too much like Black Mirror. Overall, A Random Act of Kindness is a brilliant episode because the time travel was done well. However, the dynamic between Zack and his mother was still at the forefront, so the two main plots were balanced out incredibly well. Despite everything I've said though, this is still not the best of the season.
Charlie says that if ever you see a box of matches lying around, tell Mummy because they can hurt you.
I think that most of you knew before going in that Wise Owl would be at the top, because it seems to be far and away the most popular episode of the season, and one of the most popular of the whole show. For those of you who didn't think this would be at the top, twitch you, twitch you.
Twit you. Twit you.
I really have no idea where to start with this episode, so I may as well start with the biggest talking point, the animations. Before watching, this was easily the episode I was looking forward to the most, because of the animated segments shown in the trailer, and the animations did not disappoint at all. The animations were used to essentially satirize the old 1970s public information films, like Charlie Says and the Play Safe video.
When you have time to kill, make sure time doesn't kill you. Then we'll see you around.
This satire led to some nostalgia for people like my parents, who grew up with these old videos, and it also led to a bit of comedy, specifically the taxidermy scene. In this scene, Wise Owl taught the kids how to stuff their cat. It was very horrific and gruesome, but the way it was presented made it really funny at the same time. Dark comedy at its finest. However, the animations were mostly used to fill in the gaps in the story. The story is about Reese's character Ronnie, who is a troubled man who at first seems to be haunted by these adverts. He's surrounded by stuffed animals, he follows all the rules of the adverts, he sees a feather in a bath, and even sees a naked man with an owl's head in his dream? Through the character design and the hints like the burnt ear, it's pretty obvious that Ronnie is the boy in the animations, who lost his sister in a house fire after playing with matches on her birthday. He clearly blames himself for it, and I felt really bad for him in these scenes. But then, Ronnie's dad, Wilf, appears, and shit hits the fan. Ronnie seemed very out of place in the house, especially because of his lack of taxidermy skills, as shown with what he did to the poor rabbit Ferrari when he tried to stuff it for Pemberton's character. It turns out that Wilf owns the house and is the taxidermist Pemberton was looking for. We also find out that Wilf did the voice of the Wise Owl. He then says that he doesn't blame Ronnie for the fire, before we cut to another animated segment, which has a live action Shearsmith, and is easily the most disturbing scene of the episode. We find out here that it wasn't Ronnie's fault at all, but was instead Wilf's due to being drunk and saying that it was okay to use the matches. The image of Wise Owl with a bunch of booze seriously hit like a freight train and left my jaw on the floor. However, I wasn't even able to pick it back up, as we later find out that Wilf was sexually abusing Ronnie and framed his own son for the death of his own daughter, which was his own fault. All of this together leads to an emotional gut punch and makes previous scenes like the naked owl in Ronnie's dream make sense, although it's even more disturbing now. However, despite all of this, Ronnie doesn't kill Wilf. He attempts to, yes, but decides to walk away and tell someone, and he's essentially able to grow up now. This ending was even more powerful than having Wilf die, and leaves the episode off on a slightly hopeful note, and I love how it was handled. The ending was by far the most emotional ending since Bernie Clifton's dressing room, and I adored it. I've still got more to say about the episode, but I really don't have the time for it all. I may do a full analysis of this episode at some point after some time has passed, as there's quite a lot to unpack. Overall, this was one of the creepiest, most emotional, and my third favourite number 9 story, only behind the 12 Days of Christine and Bernie Clifton's dressing room. Also, side note, But this is the episode I will go to show people how much of an incredible actor Reece Shearsmith is, as he was absolutely phenomenal in this. My favourite individual performance from him. By the way, if you're wondering, I'd use Cole Comfort to show off Steve's incredible acting abilities, and Bernie Clifton's dressing room to show the two off as a double act.
Twit you! Twit you!
Get stuffed.
So, overall, Series 7 is one of the strongest seasons of Number 9. Despite having a bit of a slow start in my opinion, it more than made up for it with a phenomenal end with 3 Oh, fuck, I dropped my phone. It more than made up for it with a phenomenal end with 3 10 out of 10 stories in a row. This is probably my second favourite series behind Series 4. I'm still amazed that this season is as great as it is, as most shows would have lost its touch by now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I want to hear what you thought of the season. Did you love it? Did you not? How would you rank the episodes? Etc, etc! I would definitely love to do more Number 9 content in the future, but I may take a little break from it at the moment, as I did do 2 large videos based on the show back to back from each other, and I don't want to get burnt out on it. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next video. What else is there to say except subscribe and goodbye. 00.